Welcome to the Future of Surrogacy, the podcast that explores the people, the innovations, and the ideas building the next generation of surrogacy.
Okay. Over the past year, the three of us have been building in this space together. And honestly, it feels like it has been 10 years, and I don't mean that offensively. It's just because we're having so much fun, but things are moving so fast. The pace of change inside surrogacy right now is extraordinary. Ad platforms are tightening policies and flagging agencies in ways that weren't 12 months ago. AI is now influencing how intended parents and surrogates discover agencies, whether we like it or not. And websites, you could have rebuilt your website a year ago, and parts of it may already be outdated because websites no longer just need to speak to humans, they need to speak to robots too. They need to be emotionally compelling and structurally interpretable by large language models, LLMs, for those that are in the know. What's been striking to us is that every time we get on a call with a new agency, there's this moment where we realize they don't know what they don't know yet, not because they aren't sophisticated, but because this space is evolving faster than most people can track. So, this episode is meant to be part insight and part practical guide because we so want our role in this industry to be helping agencies stay positively positioned throughout all these changes and not be reactive, not behind, and not exposed. So, if you're an agency owner, this episode should give you clarity. If you're on the operations side, it should give you some perspective. And if you feel like the ground has been shifting under your feet, you're not wrong, but we're here to help. So, with that, welcome back to the Future of Surrogacy, Shraddha and Billy.
Thank you for having us again, letting us back on your
Yes.
podcast.
You are welcome. You are welcome. Okay, so I want to start because I think one of the biggest tension points is around ads because so many agencies rely so heavily on paid acquisition. We've met a few that don't do any, which is smart, and that's probably the direction more people are going to be heading. But there's a lot that still rely on paid acquisition for any top of funnel activity. And so we want to talk about what's changing there and what CAPI is, because I think a lot of people don't even know what CAPI is. But we'll have Billy and Shraddha explain it to us. Billy, let's start with you. What are we seeing in terms of platform crackdowns or more accounts being flagged?
We're seeing a lot of chaos across all of the different platforms, Google, Meta, TikTok. We're seeing crackdowns on the surrogacy category in general. We've seen Google crackdowns on the surrogacy category. For the last year, we've been seeing Meta slowly cracking down more and more on anything to do with health. Surrogacy ads are completely banned on TikTok and Pinterest already. And so the share of the pie is getting smaller and smaller because there are fewer and fewer platforms that agencies can reach surrogates. I think the one that's top of mind is Meta because it is most agencies' primary way of finding candidates. And we're seeing specifically domain level category restrictions. And what that means is Meta is scanning your website, categorizing it as health, which it is. Fertility is a subset of health. But once it is categorized you that way, a few things will happen. So for one, this is only relevant to some agencies, but anyone in the EU will likely not see your ads anymore. And anyone in the US, they will see your ads, but the pixel and the targeting is going to get a lot less intelligent because you can't do things like custom events. And so we've been working very hard to figure out how do we help agencies get around these issues. And so far, I think the solution that we found is what we call CAPI.
Before you start talking about CAPI, though, because I think most people, well, two things. One, I think most people used to think that it was about the creative performance of ads, and now that's literally out the window because
Yeah.
if you look at any surrogacy ads, they're almost all identical now. And then step up was the pixel. Oh, do you have the pixel installed? So will you talk a little bit about what the pixel is and then how CAPI is different than the pixel? And also explain what CAPI stands for.
Yes. So you've probably heard of the Facebook pixel. That is the little snippet of code that you put into your website, and it helps track people that are coming through to your website through the ads on Meta and clicking on something. That's usually about as far as in that you can track. And that helps your ads target better. So every time someone does an action that you want them to do, like submit a form, that is feeding back to the pixel and saying, more of these people are likely to be good. The issue with that Well, there's a couple of issues with that. So the first is that it is susceptible to category restrictions, like I was just saying. So if Meta flags you as health, it's going to make it much harder for that front end pixel to work. And so your targeting is going to get worse because it's not actually able to target people in an intelligent way. So it's just showing it to everyone. What you want is to just show it to people who are most likely to submit on the form. But that sort of brings me to issue number 2, which is that it's kind of a dumb reinforcement. So it's saying, show me more people that are more likely to submit the form. That doesn't take into account medical suitability. That doesn't take into account things like location or gender or age. I mean, leave a comment if you've ever had a man apply to be a surrogate at your agency, because we see that all the time, because Meta will expand its audience, try and find as many people as possible that are likely to fill out the form. So that's the pixel.
In the world of surrogacy, now that we've worked with so many agencies, we've seen thousands of candidates coming through, is like 70% of candidates get disqualified after the form.
All the way down the funnel, it's like 95%. Most actually match with a single digit number of candidates. So that number is very, very low.
Which means your ads, even with the pixel, your ads are being optimized on the majority of people that are being disqualified.
Right. It's a weak signal when you optimize for just the pixel.
So what is the future, Billy?
The future is CAPI, and that stands for Conversion API. And so what this means is you are not embedding anything on your website. You're instead using an API, so a way of sending events from the server to Meta to say more of these people. So what that looks like in practice is as they're moving through different stages, and so they're more likely to be qualified if they're moving through different stages, you're sending those positive reinforcements back to the algorithm at Meta and saying more of these people. So instead, with the pixel, you're saying more of these people for anyone that fills out the form. With CAPI, you're saying more of these people who actually get approved to be surrogates. And so it makes the algorithm significantly smarter and significantly better at targeting. And it bypasses the category and domain restrictions. And so it allows us to keep doing it even if you're in the health category.
So how does one know if their marketing agency, like what are the questions that you could ask your outside agency to see, are they doing this? Because if they're not doing this, that seems like a pretty big red flag. If you don't even know what it is yet, that's red flag number 1 probably. But if they haven't told you about it, but how would you know?
Yeah, you should just be asking your agency to be a bit more detailed about their targeting. So questions like, are we running server-side CAPI? How is the pixel being trained? Are we doing front end? Do we know how Meta categorizes us? Where is our conversion funnel? Like where are we losing people? How are we reinforcing and finding more of the right kinds of people? And any ads agency, anyone that is charging you thousands of dollars to run ads should be intelligently targeting on Meta. It is not rocket science to do. I feel like sometimes we do ourselves a bit of a disservice when we say stuff like that, but really isn't. It's not that hard to do, and you should be doing it.
Surrogacy is uniquely set up for CAPI because there are literally stages where, okay, this person is now more qualified. Now this person is more qualified. Now this person is more qualified. And so that to me feels like it's the perfect scenario for CAPI, because at every one of those stages, CAPI is sending back information to Meta and Google to be optimizing the ads.
Yeah, so we do every single stage in Simbe that you have live. There are sort of 2 axes that you need to be reinforcing the algorithm on. The first is time. So the quicker you can be sending positive signals back to Meta, the better. So when they've just been approved by the form, when they are moved to the second stage, usually that's the application stage. And because we're doing this programmatically on Simbe's side, it happens automatically. And those usually happen within a 7-day window. And then you have long-term signals as well. So you have that initial targeting, and then you have way down funnel within 30 days targeting. And here are the actual approved candidates. We want much more of these. Obviously, Meta needs as much signal as possible. The more signals and the more data you get it, the better. And so that's why we do every single stage.
Okay. And some people might not know just how many stages we have now. What's the full breadth of what we're tracking?
So we can do lead, which is anyone that's coming in on your website or anyone that isn't quite sure if they're ready to see if they qualify. We do intake, which is basic qualification, answering questions. We do your long form application. We do profile from that application automatically, designed exactly how you want it to look. And we do scheduling as well. So once they've passed all of these stages and they're looking good and you want to actually chat to them face to face, Riley will schedule a meeting with your candidate.
And Cappy is literally sending information back to Meta and Google at every single one of those stages. So I think it's important that people totally understand that. That's great. Okay. Shraddha, anything else on this topic before we move on?
The only thing that comes to mind is every stage that gets pinged back to Meta, we're also able to provide the relative weight for that event. So we can tell Meta that somebody that gets qualified from the initial form, maybe them 10%, but somebody that gets qualified from the final application or the interview, weigh them 80%. And we can align that with your particular marketing spend and how much money you want to spend. And so it can be totally customizable for the client.
That's a very important point. I think that's great. And does Simbe have to be managing an agency's ads in order for that agency to have Cappy?
No, Simbe does not have to be managing the ads. Simbe just needs some initial setup token, and then it can be automated from there. And it works for every ad. You don't have to set it up for each ad campaign at a time. It's a one-time setup.
Okay, so like somebody can be using Simbe for our intake and application and interview and profile. We don't have to be running your ads, and we're not trying to gatekeep Cappy. Like to Billy's point is we're happy if you're using Simbe as a platform to set up Cappy.
Yes.
Work with your outside agency to set it up.
Yes, exactly.
But even if you fix the ads, we fundamentally believe that ads are dying a slow death. What we've been seeing in the platforms that Billy mentioned, we think will only continue, in which case we have to be prepared for what's happening next, which is websites and AEO. And so, I mean, especially with surrogacy, like the emotional appeal and the storytelling is incredibly important and to tell your agency's story. But now your website also has to speak to robots because ads are on the decline. And LLMs, large language models, and discovery via large language models is on the uptick, meaning people are going to ChatGPT, they're going to Gemini and typing in, what's the agency I should use? And so if the LLM can't also find what it needs, then you will be invisible. So, Billy, let's talk through this in terms of what do you think it means for a website to speak to humans and to robots?
I think that it's the new paradigm for running a business in the world nowadays. I would liken this to the shift that had to happen when everyone was going on their phones for visiting websites. Like that shift to, okay, now our website has to look good on a phone, which I will say a lot of companies still have not fully done. But there is a similar shift to, okay, now our website has to be able to speak to robots. So everyone's websites are getting constantly crawled. You may be familiar with a version of this with Google. The more nerdier agency owners out there may be familiar with things like sitemaps and robots.txt as a way of telling Google's crawler how to navigate your website because it's not intelligent enough to actually be able to click through it like a human. Now we have LLM bots also crawling the website, and they're crawling the websites a little bit differently. So it's a similar ethos to SEO, and plug here for a previous episode of this podcast where I know you had an expert for AEO on. So you should go listen to that before, stop this podcast and go listen to that one because, I think that's an important primer. But the website now has to be able to be understood by LLMs. And so what that means is things like clean, structured data that is text-based. I actually was looking at one agency website today, and they have a bunch of their critical information that is critical for surrogates to know in the form of images and not as text. And that can't be read by LLMs in any kind of accurate way. And so your you are preventing any indexing of your website that needs to be done by LLM. So everything needs to be in clean, structured data. The kind of best practice is to actually have an LLM.txt. So the crawler bots know where to go, and you can actually dump all of your information in that document. And so that's like just one like quick and easy tip, the way that you can kind of get your website ready for this shift that's already happening. But it still has to speak to humans, right? Like people are still going to your website. And so again, to rag on this metaphor a bit more, now you have to design your website for desktop and mobile. You now have to design your content for humans and LLMs.
What's the name of the woman that writes that newsletter?
Koki Hasiotis, shout out. I imagine she's not listening, but she's a good friend of mine and a genius writer.
And she writes really intelligently about this. Humans need plot, robots need data. And your brand voice means nothing to a robot, but it means a ton to surrogate candidates and IPs. And so the people that are in charge of content, like their job at your agency just doubled because they have to write for both now. And if you're not writing for both, you are going to be behind, and you potentially are going to be invisible because now the robots are shopping on behalf of the people that are searching. I type something into ChatGPT and I'm going to take the recommendations it gives me. I'm not going to spend the time to vet everybody's site. And so if you are not creating your website to serve both the emotional human and the unambiguous data-driven robot, you're going to be behind. I know it sounds harsh.
It's
No,
fair. I mean, Shraddha, how many times have we used LLMs to compare to pieces of software or to do deep research on things like that?
I think for not even just research for software, I think for anything, my entry point now is always an LLM. I'm rarely ever going to Google, directly, or rarely ever going to a website directly. Even if I do, I'll take the link and give it to my LLM to say, summarize this for me, or find something valuable on this site for me. So I think consumer behavior in the younger population in general is entirely changing. You no longer Google, you GPT.
Yeah. Koki writes about this, but I thought it was so clever. And the first time I had heard of it, but we all are super familiar with like B2C, B2B, B2B2C, which is business to business to consumer. But now it's B2R, which is business to robot. And then B2R to H, which is really applicable in surrogacy, which is business to robot to human.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure the robots can find you to be recommending you to the humans. B to R to H. Say that 10 times fast. Okay.
B to R to H. Yeah, I mean, if you're still skeptical and listening to this, like think about how people are very, very rapidly using ChatGPT and similar for sounding boards, and think about how many times you've had situations where surrogates are comparing or considering two different agencies, and just sit with that. Like, I think it is extremely likely. In fact, we've started to collect the data because we have really great AEO tools for monitoring this kind of stuff, where people are saying like, what is the difference between these two agencies? I'm trying to make a decision between these two. Can you help me? And what any of these GPTs are going to do is go to the website, summarize the content there, and try and help them make a decision. And if you don't have your content in a way that's easily readable, if you don't have your compensation package really nicely structured and really easy to find, they might not pick you. And that's something that should worry you, and probably does already.
Websites must now emotionally convert humans and structurally communicate with LLMs. And if you fail at either, the humans won't convert and AI won't surface you. So I think if you remember anything about the website conversation, remember that.
And it goes beyond just website. I think LLMs are going to definitely read your website, but they will also read any other publicly available source. So they will go to
That's a great
Substacks and Reddits and Quora, and they will find any information that they can on surrogacy agencies. And if you're not mentioned enough times, you'll lose out.
Which brings us to the next point about discovery. It is so important now because SEO was king or queen for the longest period of time. And that meant your website had to be built properly. And your website still needs to be built properly, but it needs to be built for AEO now, not just SEO. And so what Shraddha's point is, AEO doesn't just look at your website like Google used to. The LLMs, yes, they'll look at your website. It needs to be built properly, but they'll also pull in data from the third-party credible forums. And I roll in terms of people that hate Reddit, but Reddit is incredibly important, especially to ChatGPT. The credible third-party forums where content is created by users and verified and upvoted by users, they also use to decide which organizations they're going to be recommending.
How on earth do we handle that, Erin?
Yes. That is one of the things that we're working on with our agency clients. And number one, you have to be showing up. And so you have to start participating. The two that we're helping agencies show up in are Reddit and Quora. And even in those two forums, there's slightly different rules. And there is a blog post on our website, so we won't go into it in this podcast, but the general impression is you have to be participating in the conversations without being promotional. And that's super hard to do for agencies. But I think that the short story, if anybody needs to get going on AEO right away, is create your Reddit accounts, create your Quora accounts. Which accounts you create on those are also in that blog post, so you can reference that. And then just start participating in the conversations. There's only a few primary threads in Reddit and Quora that relate to surrogacy. And so start participating and see the idea behind any content you create in those forums should be, how do I add value to this conversation? How do I help the reader in this conversation? Not promoting your agency, but how do I help? And which is a kind concept in terms of content creation.
I feel like that's what we try and do with this podcast, really. We're trying to help agencies. Now, if that benefits our business, that's wonderful. We want you to be successful, and we want there to be a wonderful, thriving surrogacy industry. And I think the same ethos is true, right? Like, you should be helping people figure out the journey of surrogacy for themselves. That may result in them working with you, but that may also just result in them being well informed. And that's a net good. And better public conversations around surrogacy is a huge benefit. So it will help your business, but it's also something the industry desperately needs.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I would leave any listeners with in terms of AEO is, and I am so guilty of this, I write in very visual language and don't in those forums. Give very structured, very clear, very direct answers, because that, again, is the kind of content that LLMs are looking for. You want to participate in the high intent prompts, so the prompts that are getting a lot of action, you want to be participating in, and you want to become a trusted source. So you can't do this like, I did it on Tuesday, and then you drop it for 2 weeks. This is something that you need to do, like add it to your calendar reminders and participate. Log into Reddit, log into Quora, search your threads, and participate in the conversations weekly, if not daily. Because the more you participate, the more that AI will start to trust you as a source. Okay, we've done a great job of covering how ads are changing, how website and AEO will, if you build those correctly, will help make you more visible to the LLMs. We wanted to shift the conversation now over to engagement, because I think, again, we've completely expanded the scope of what we're doing for agencies within Simbe. And now we have had thousands and thousands of candidates moving through the platform and many, many agencies. And so, Shraddha, I'm going to send this one over to you. We've learned something that I thought was a little bit counterintuitive in terms of engagement around choice when interacting with AI. So can you talk us through that, what we're seeing there?
Yeah, this was an interesting experiment we ran with one of our agency clients. Initially, they wanted to not give the surrogate a choice to pick the mode that they chose to interact with Riley through. And it ended up, we saw fewer engagements in that way. I think we saw an engagement increase when we gave them a choice to pick between text or chat. And ultimately, almost everybody still picked text, SMS, but the additional step to choose how you want to be interacted with, I think brought people more agency. And we saw a 9% increase in the engagement rate after we ran that experiment.
Yeah, 9 percentage points. So quite a significant uplift. And that was really interesting because I feel like there's this idea that you have to make everything as streamlined and like at least amount of effort possible in order to get good engagement. But that's not always true when it comes to things like managing expectations.
Yeah. I think manually picking, hey, I want to talk to you on SMS made them look at their phone and made them react and respond better.
Right, because we also tested changing the messaging and
Correct.
saying, "Check your phone, Riley's
Very
reaching out to
large.
you,"
Yeah.
very large, and that didn't move the needle for us.
Do it.
What moved the
No.
needle was making a choice. That's a really interesting psychological element here.
I do too, because I'm such an efficiency junkie and a streamliner that like, no, like the minute they fill it out, just text them right away. But that little micro commitment of getting to choose really does create more engagement.
But on the contrary, we ran another experiment about efficiency and streamlining. For the candidates that had all green on their intake, we decided to automatically move them to the next stage for application. And we saw an uplift in numbers there too. And my hunch there is it's because they're already engaged and they already have momentum talking with Riley. So not waiting until the case manager sends them the next step, keep the momentum. And we saw them filling out applications faster.
We actually saw one agency that when we were talking to them, when we met with them, they had 0 candidates getting through application. They had a ton of intake, tons of intake, but they had 0 candidates getting through application.
And now they have 15 people that were interviewed and qualified.
Approved. Yeah, in a month. I think it's a good microcosm.
And who wouldn't want 15 more approved candidates in their flows? I think it's so exciting that the structures that we're building and the sort of best practices that we're developing at scale here is actually moving the needle.
Which is a great segue for let's talk really quickly about what we're envisioning for the future, because I think now that we've had so many agencies trust us and we've had so many candidates moving through the pipeline, we're getting much more confident about what we can build in the future to continue this momentum for agencies. So let's talk through them. We can talk about medical records, humans overriding Riley, IP-facing flows, and one-off campaigns. So Billy, why don't you tackle medical records integration first?
Certainly. We did a lot of research and a lot of user research about medical records options available to agencies. There's a really, rich and healthy landscape of medical records companies that are really nailing it. And our vision is to be the infrastructure through which we can plug in different pieces of great software into journey management. And so we're taking an agnostic approach. So we're in conversation with all of the major medical records collectors and reviewers and trying to build integrations with them so that you can continue to manage a candidate through that sort of part of the process, all from the Simbe dashboard with the inclusion of Riley.
Great answer. Well, ping-ponging over to you, Strata. Talk about what we mean when we say a human overriding Riley.
Yeah, Riley's very good at answering knowledge-based questions and concerns. We've seen a few cases where AI isn't equipped to answer certain questions about, very specific medical history, or a surrogate just prefers talking to a human being. What we've seen so far is case managers will, reach out to them one-off on their own, and it can cause a little bit of confusion because now there's 2 streams of conversation the surrogate is having with the same agency. So a feature worth building now is the human can talk as Riley. So they can just say, hey, Riley, pause your conversation. I will step in. I will talk to the surrogate. I will take this part of this conversation with the surrogate through the same channel so that A, it's well organized. The surrogates can have one number to talk to throughout the process for the agency. And B, it allows a lot of control for the agencies to handle sensitive cases or to handle people when they prefer just talking to a human being. Because one of the commandments at Simbe we have is a human is always in the loop and a human is always involved and always making decisions. And this is just one other step in that direction for us.
And so if the case manager pauses Riley in that situation, can they restart Riley?
Yeah, I'm envisioning it as a button that says, I'm taking over, and when the case manager is done with the human override, they can just have Riley restart. And Riley will also have the context of the conversation that the human has had with that surrogate so that she isn't repeating herself, isn't asking the same questions.
That's awesome. While we have you talking, let's then
Yes.
also move you into one-off campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, I think majority of the use case is every so often agencies want to run, a one-off marketing campaign, or there's a special way you want to deal with for state-specific people. We see that sometimes for California, where they want to, put surrogates through a different flow. Or if there are more tech-leaning agencies, they want to run an A/B test where they're like, what happens if we do this versus if we do that? And right now we can do it. It's just something that we handle on the back end, but we've been ideating on how to expose that ability on the dashboard so they can say, for a short-lived campaign of a month starting tomorrow for candidates that live in California, make them see this form instead of that form and have them fill out an extra amount of information. That, in addition with the referral program, where a previous surrogate can come back and have her specific code and says, well, I'm bringing in more surrogates and this is my referral code. Tracking both of them together will help agencies with marketing and lead generation pipeline.
That's awesome. Okay. Last quick update. Billy, talk through IP facing flows because obviously there are two parties involved in these journeys. And right now we really only deal with one.
Yeah. So we've built everything up until match for the surrogate. And so the natural progression is IP facing flows as well. So it looks a little bit different. I think it's to do with providing an educational resource instead of necessarily screening someone out or in, but providing that sort of 24-hour knowledge base, FAQs, someone to talk to. And then a huge part of the IP flow is document collection. And actually, this is something that will also benefit the surrogate flows as well. So this, in general, this is a feature within a feature, but the ability to collect documents, like I need your insurance card, I need your photo ID. And then Riley's there making sure that those documents are getting collected, doing all of the nudging so that you don't have to do the nudging, and then signing of documents as well. This is, again, this kind of connective tissue idea, integrating with things like DocuSign and PandaDoc. But then again, the Riley addition is that she's there managing people through this journeys and making sure they're being nudged and getting everything done. And so once you have all of the surrogate flow, you have the IP flow, you have the matching profiles, you're then able to associate those two profiles together. And then that leads us to our much larger vision,
which is?
It's what we're calling constellation. Our vision is ultimately that there is one platform to run this entire journey. And for every journey, there is a constellation of different parties that are associated with the journey. So that is you, the agencies, you, the law firms, clinics, insurance companies, medical records, escrow, the IPs, the surrogates, the families of the surrogates and the IPs. And so there are so many different people that have to be managed throughout this journey. And there still isn't really a solution for all of these different people to be managed in one specific platform. So that's ultimately our 1 to 2 year vision.
Yeah, and it just isn't just a simple example of the friction within that journey because it's so fragmented is, let's say, a surrogate's medical clearance gets updated. So right now that lives in medical record provider, and that can either be manually forwarded or agency has to log in and get it and download it and incorporate into whatever CRM then they're in. And then they evaluate it and then gets shared somehow through some portal system with a clinic, and eventually other parties too, maybe legal. But
it's just chaos is what you're describing. I'm
Yes.
glazing over. I'm like, oh my God, how do you even manage this?
talking to Sarah at Art Risk the other day, she blew my mind in terms of the dependencies. Here we have all this technology available at our fingertips, and yet, wait, we're relying on the surrogate to pay her insurance policy, and nobody knows if she did it. And that has massive ramifications on the cost of these journeys. It's it could potentially throw a giant bomb that nobody knows just went off in a journey. So it's It's the ability to manage data. It's the ability to keep everybody safe. It's the ability to inject transparency into this so everyone knows what everyone's role is and what they're doing and have they done it. And Billy, you said it earlier, but the idea of Simbe being the connective tissue, not recreating the wheel, but partnering, integrating, collaborating to bring everything together into one platform. If we can do that on one platform, these journeys are always going to be emotionally arduous, but they don't have to be logistically as arduous.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, intended parents are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for this journey. Surrogates are putting their lives on the line for this journey. And very often, the way that they get their information and are managed through a journey is through poorly formatted emails and texts. And so I think the other part of this is I'm a big experience person. I'm a very visual person. How do we make the visual experience and the journey of going on this process more enjoyable? How do we inject the joy and the fun and the education and the support side of things? How do we inject community and help people help themselves? That's always been thesis of mine is, case managers wouldn't have to spend so much time texting people and managing people if they were able to self-serve information, for example. And so that's also part of this vision. It's not just everyone has a portal that they log into and it's kind of annoying. It's that there is a huge benefit for every single different part of that constellation in being on the platform because they have a better time doing whatever they have to do.
Yeah, and you have Riley on that dashboard in the constellation that you can ask questions to. Imagine she can look into your history and say, "Well, yeah, I mean, you were supposed to have taken this medicine 3 days ago. Looks like you're late. Can I help you? Here are additional resources for you to manage this." Just a friend that you don't necessarily. The questions may be small enough. Or you might feel embarrassed to ask a human being and keep bothering a case manager, or it might be late at night and having Riley on the dashboard in the constellation can help you just manage this with much less cognitive overload.
I guarantee that surrogates and IPs are already talking to LLMs as they're going through these journeys, and they're getting advice and they're being emotionally managed by LLMs already. And you have no insight into what they're saying, what advice they're getting, what they're being told. I think we should be wanting to, have a say in those experiences. You wouldn't let an untrained case manager advise a surrogate on injections. The same should be true with any of their resources, right?
Okay, I have kind of an esoteric example that I'm going to try to inject into here, if it makes sense. I'm obsessed with this new app called Whisperflow, and the CEO of Whisperflow is talking about the only reason keyboards exist is because humans needed a way to communicate to the computer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about it like that. But it's true. And so now that we have voice and voice can talk to computer, like keyboards will probably go away in some capacity because I can get so much more done in a day just talking to my computer all day long. And
Yes. Like Gen Z are not texting anymore. They're voice noting. Everything becomes much more verbal.
Yes. Okay. So what if a journey management system that people use is really just a means to an end because you're just trying to keep all the pieces put together in one system. But now with the advent of AI, like, do we need a journey management system? Do we really need a CRM? Nobody wants export a report on these people in these states and da. What if you could just talk and be like, hey, go get me these people and send them an email. Anybody that hasn't been talked to in the last 3 days, figure out where they are and send them the appropriate message. Go. That's what I feel like we have the potential to build, where I can be using my voice when I'm in the drive-through. Because that's when it pops into my head like, oh, shoot, I need to reach out to the people that haven't moved forward last month.
I could do you one better. Riley could recommend to you that these are all the people that you haven't reached out to in a month. Should I go talk to them? And then all you have to say is, yes, Riley, go do it.
Proactive. Beautiful. Okay, so the future is bright for surrogacy and for Simbe.
The future is hot pink.
The future is hot pink. Billy, good job. Okay, I think we should end it there. Thanks for spending some time, and hopefully the community finds some value in this. And as always, we're here to help and brainstorm. And if you want to participate in that beautiful future, let us know.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Thanks so much for listening to The Future of Surrogacy. If you liked today's episode, send it to a friend or a colleague that should hear it. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn to keep up with new episodes and behind-the-scenes updates. And if there's a topic you want us to cover or someone you think we should talk to, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next time.